In Canada, 60,000 children live in foster care. In BC alone, there are 10,000 children in care, and 65% of those children are Aboriginal. Many children are in care because there are no other options to protect them from abuse in their own homes. They are in care by court order because of emotional, physical, or sexual abuse and neglect. But what if this abuse continues when we put them into foster care?
Well, first of all, the Ministry of Children and Family Development will never ever take into consideration what's happening with the parents per se. Their primary responsibility is for the child. And although in theory they're removing the child from the situation because they feel they're at risk of harm or have had harm, often the child suffers tremendous trauma from separation. And there's been cases like the Savannah Hall case where the mother had a drug problem and they took the little girl away from her because she was continuing to use drugs. But the child was thriving in that environment. She was fairly healthy, but had no physical signs of abuse or neglect.
In 2001, Savannah was brought into the ER by her foster parents. She was in a coma, she had swelling of the brain, she was hypothermic.
Where she then proceeded to be abused, neglected, and actually murdered. So that's an extreme case, but what happens is we don't treat the bigger picture. Children never have experience their problems in isolation. Children always belong to a family unit, and there are some tremendously good foster homes, and there are some foster homes that are not so good, and everything in between. I don't have to speak from my experience. I can just speak from policy, government policy. Not only does every single child need counselling when they're removed from their family situation, but in 2005, the British Columbia government actually abolished all counselling for kids who had been removed because of sexual abuse. So they used to make sure that children who were victims of sexual abuse had counselling, and they abolished that piece, so none of the children received counselling.
Stories all over you. In the morning, I'll call you.
Sometimes they're not really careful about ensuring that the child is going to be in a better situation. Sometimes it's just removing the child and then plunking them in another situation without taking into factor everything that's going on. And an example I'm going to give you is a case where they remove a child from family because they're at risk or they've been abused. And then they put them in another family situation where that's a relative, because the foster system pays less money to a relative than they do to a normal lay person who isn't related to the child. But the problem is, in some cases, they have put them at increased risk. So the Sherry Charlie case, 2002, they removed the little girl from her family, put her in her uncle's home. He had a history of aggravated assault and all kinds of other things, and he bludgeoned her to death. That's a topic that we could go on for forever. And first of all, the rates are higher in British Columbia than they are nationwide. It's about 50% nationwide. It's 60 to 65% Aboriginal children of Aboriginal descent are in foster care in British Columbia. And we have to look at the big picture. Let's just take a look at the residential programs. The last residential programs in Canada closed 20 years ago. And what we did is we removed children from their families and put them into residential schools, and then there they were physically and emotionally and sexually abused. Those children went on to become parents, and they had no parenting role modeling. So they had a higher propensity to abuse and neglect their own children. This isn't excusing it, it's explaining it. And so that the numbers, we always have had a high degree of Aboriginal children in the foster system, but the numbers have gotten higher. And then we also know that patterns follow systems and follow with families. So that unless someone breaks a cycle of abuse begets abuse, and so forth. And we also know that substance misuse is very prevalent amongst certain groups of the Aboriginal population. I don't want to categorize everyone in the same situation, because there's many First Nations people who are very successful, wonderful parents, but the facts remain that high numbers of their kids end up in foster care.
The BC representative for Children and Youth has been investigating the Ministry of Children and Family Development and found that over the last 12 years, they have spent $66 million on meetings and research projects when children are going without adequate foster placements or support systems. This is a colossal failure of public policy.
I've got a really strong opinion on that one, because I was very instrumental in making sure that there was another oversight body that was recreated in 2006. The representative for Children and Youth, Dr. Mary Ellen Turpin-Lafond, there were new position, new ministry was created in order for her to supervise what's happening in the Ministry of Children and Family Development. So every child now who's injured or dies in care, her department investigates and makes recommendations. But here's the clincher. She actually does not respond to a political party or the governing party. She responds to the legislature in general. She's supposed to be neutral. She makes recommendation after recommendation after recommendation that's kiboshed. The government poo-poos it. The ministry ignores it. And so they created another oversight body in order to try and straighten things out with what is happening within the Ministry of Children and Family Development, and they're not listening to her. She produces reports that are very, very carefully articulated, and she makes recommendations that are doable, and they're ignored. The kids, they're our future. These are the kids who are going to be running the show, hopefully, and we are failing them miserably. A healthy child and a healthy family is a healthy society.
We need to stop failing them. Let's be a voice for our children.
Change your heart